The rain came down in cold sheets across the London streets. Celestine stood beneath the awning of a milliner's shop, her gloved hands clutching a package wrapped in brown paper. She watched the carriages roll past, their wheels splashing through puddles that reflected the grey sky above. She did not want to be here, but duty had called her back to this city, back to the memories she had spent 3 years trying to bury. Across the street, a black carriage pulled to a stop. The door opened and a tall man stepped out. He wore a dark coat that fell to his knees, and his hair was the colour of midnight. Even from this distance, Celestine recognized him. Thorn. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed herself against the shop window, praying he would not look her way. But then she saw the child. A small boy, no more than 5 years old, climbed down from the carriage. His hair was the same dark colour as his father's. He wore a miniature coat and held a wooden horse in one hand. The boy looked up at Thorn with wide, trusting eyes. Celestine's heart twisted. She had not known about the child. How could she have known? Thorn took the boy's hand, and together they walked toward a bookshop. The boy skipped beside him, chattering about something Celestine could not hear. Thorn's expression was soft, patient. He looked down at his son with a tenderness that made Celestine's chest ache. 3 years ago, she had left him without explanation. She had walked away from their engagement, from the life they had planned together. She had done it to protect him, though he would never know that. And now, he had a son. The realization hit her like a physical blow. While she had been gone, he had moved on. He had married someone else. He had built a family. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. The rain began to ease. Celestine pulled her cloak tighter and stepped out from beneath the awning. She needed to leave before Thorn saw her, before the past collided with the present in a way she could not control. But as she turned to go, the boy looked up. Their eyes met across the street. For a moment, neither of them moved. The boy tilted his head, studying her with a curiosity that made Celestine's stomach drop. Then he tugged on Thorn's sleeve. "Papa," the boy said, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Why doesn't that lady like us?" Thorn froze. His head turned slowly, and his gaze found hers. Time stopped. 3 years of silence, of carefully constructed distance, shattered in an instant. Thorn's expression shifted from shock to something darker, something she could not name. Celestine's feet refused to move. She stood there, trapped by the weight of his stare, by the innocent question still hanging in the air. The boy pulled at Thorn's hand again. "Papa, do you know her?" Thorn's jaw tightened. He did not answer his son. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Celestine's face. She knew she should run. She should disappear back into the crowd, back into the life she had built far from him. But something in his gaze held her in place. "Celestine," he said, and her name on his lips was both a question and an accusation. She swallowed hard. "Your Grace." The formal address was a knife between them. Once she had called him by his name. Once she had whispered it in the dark, had laughed it across ballroom floors. Now he was a stranger, a duke with a title and a child and a life that no longer included her. "What are you doing here?" Thorn's voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the edge beneath it. Celestine's voice faltered. "I'm visiting family." It was not entirely a lie. Her aunt lived on the outskirts of London, and Celestine had come to help settle her affairs. But that was not the whole truth, and they both knew it. The boy looked between them, his small face creased with confusion. "Papa, who is she?" Thorn's expression softened when he looked down at his son. He crouched to the boy's level, placing a hand on his shoulder. "This is Miss Celestine, an old friend." The word friend felt wrong, inadequate, cruel even. The boy studied Celestine with solemn eyes. "Why did you look sad when you saw us?" The question was so innocent, so painfully perceptive that Celestine felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. She glanced at Thorn, searching for help, but his face was unreadable. I wasn't sad, I was just surprised. The boy did not look convinced. Mama says surprises make people smile, but you didn't smile. The word mama was another blow. Of course, the boy's mother, Thorn's wife. Where is your wife? Celestine asked, keeping her voice steady. She needed to know, needed to understand how completely he had moved on. Thorn stood slowly. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw a flicker of something raw, something that looked almost like pain. There is no wife, he said quietly. Celestine's world tilted. But the boy is mine, Thorn said. His hand rested protectively on his son's shoulder. And mine alone. The implications crashed over her. No wife, a child, 3 years of absence and silence between them. I don't understand, Celestine whispered. Neither do I. Thorn's voice was hard now. You left without a word, Celestine. You disappeared as if I meant nothing to you. And now you stand here looking at my son as if... He stopped himself, his jaw working. As if you have any right to be surprised by the life I've built. His words cut deep, but she deserved them. She had hurt him. She had left him standing at the altar of their future, alone and confused. And she had done it without explanation, without closure. Because explaining would have meant telling him the truth, and the truth would have destroyed him. The boy tugged at Thorn's coat. Papa, why are you upset? Thorn took a breath, visibly composing himself. I'm not upset, Julian. I'm just talking to an old friend. Julian. The boy's name was Julian. Celestine felt something shift in her chest, a softening she could not afford. Perhaps we should go, she said, taking a step back. I didn't mean to intrude. Intrude? Thorn's laugh was bitter. You walked out of my life 3 years ago and now you speak of intrusion. Thorn, please. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't say my name as if you still have the right to it. Celestine flinched. She deserved his anger, but standing here, watching it pour from him while his son looked on with wide, confused eyes, was unbearable. I'm sorry, she said, and the words felt impossibly small. I should go. She turned away, her heart pounding. She had taken 3 steps when Julian's voice stopped her. Will we see you again? She looked back. The boy was watching her with an expression so hopeful, so open, that it made her throat tighten. I don't think so, she said gently. Julian's face fell. Oh. Thorn's expression was unreadable. He stood behind his son, one hand still resting on the boy's shoulder, and said nothing. Celestine forced herself to turn away, to walk down the street and disappear into the crowd. Every step felt like tearing away a piece of herself, but she did not look back. She could not. The next morning, Celestine sat in her aunt's parlour, staring at the cold tea in her cup. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, but it did nothing to warm the chill in her bones. You saw him, didn't you? Her aunt's voice was soft, knowing. Celestine did not look up. Yes. And the boy? Yes. Aunt Margaret sighed. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. You can't keep running, child. I'm not running. I'm here, aren't I? Your body is here, but your heart has been running for 3 years. Celestine set down her teacup with a sharp clink. You don't understand. Then help me understand. Margaret leaned forward. You loved him. He loved you. And then, one day, you ended the engagement without explanation. You moved to the countryside and refused all contact. Now he has a child, and you look as if your world has ended. What am I missing? Celestine closed her eyes. The weight of the secret pressed down on her like a stone. She had carried it alone for so long. I was protecting him, she said finally. From what? From me. Margaret's brow furrowed. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. Celestine's voice was raw. My mother died of a blood disease. The doctors said it runs in families. They said I might have it too. They said if I did, I would not live long. And if I had children, her voice broke, they would suffer the same fate. The silence that followed was heavy. Oh, child, Margaret whispered. I couldn't do that to him. Celestine's hands trembled. I couldn't marry him, knowing I might die within a few years. I couldn't let him watch me waste away, and I couldn't bear children who would be cursed with the same illness. So I left. Did you tell him? No. Why not? Because he would have stayed. Celestine looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He would have married me anyway. He would have sacrificed his future, his chance at a family, his happiness, all for me. And I couldn't let him do that. I loved him too much. Margaret shook her head slowly. And so you made the choice for him? It was the only choice. It was cruel, Celestine. To both of you. The words stung, but Celestine did not argue. She had replayed that decision 1,000 times in her mind. She had questioned it, regretted it, defended it. But in the end, she always came back to the same conclusion. She had done what she thought was right, even if it had broken her heart in the process. And now? Margaret asked gently. What will you do now? Celestine had no answer. 3 days later, Celestine received an unexpected visitor. She was in the garden, tending to her aunt's roses, when the butler appeared at the door. Miss Celestine, you have a caller. She straightened, brushing dirt from her gloves. Who is it? The Duke of Ashford. Her heart stopped. I'm not receiving visitors. He insisted it was urgent. He has the young master with him. Julian. Celestine's resolve wavered. She should send them away. She should maintain the distance she had fought so hard to create. But the thought of that little boy standing at the door, confused and hurt, made her decision. Show them to the parlour, she said quietly. She took a moment to compose herself, to smooth her hair and straighten her dress. Then she walked inside, her heart pounding with every step. Thorne stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome. But there were new lines around his eyes, a weariness that had not been there before. Julian sat on the sofa, swinging his legs. When he saw Celestine, his face lit up. Miss Celestine! He jumped down and ran to her. Papa said we could visit. Celestine looked at Thorne, her eyebrows raised in question. Julian has been asking about you, Thorne said stiffly. He wanted to see you again. I did, Julian nodded enthusiastically. I told Papa you seemed sad, and he said maybe we could visit and make you happy. Celestine's throat tightened. She knelt down to Julian's level. That's very kind of you. Are you happy now? The boy asked, his eyes wide and earnest. She forced a smile. I am happier now that you're here. Julian beamed. Good! Papa says making people happy is important. Celestine glanced up at Thorne. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made her chest ache. Julian, Thorne said, why don't you go look at the garden? I believe there are some interesting flowers outside. Julian hesitated, looking between them. Then he nodded and scampered toward the French doors that led to the garden. Once he was out of earshot, Thorne turned to Celestine. We need to talk, he said. They sat across from each other in the parlour, the distance between them both physical and emotional. Celestine folded her hands in her lap, waiting. Thorne spoke first. Why did you leave? The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. I had my reasons, Celestine said carefully. That's not an answer. It's all I can give you. Thorn's jaw tightened. Do you have any idea what you put me through? I searched for you. I went to your family, your friends. No one would tell me where you had gone. It was as if you had vanished from the earth. I'm sorry. Sorry? He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You think an apology erases 3 years of silence, 3 years of wondering what I did wrong, 3 years of... He stopped himself, his hands clenched into fists. You owe me more than sorry, Celestine. She stood as well, her own frustration rising. What do you want me to say? That I was wrong? That I regret it? I can't change the past, Thorn. Then at least tell me the truth. He turned to face her, his eyes blazing. Why did you leave? I can't. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Yes. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping just inches from her. It matters to me. She could feel the heat of him, the familiar scent of sandalwood and rain. It took everything in her not to reach out, not to close the distance between them. Thorn, please, she whispered. Don't do this. Don't do what? Don't ask for the truth? Don't demand an explanation for why the woman I loved disappeared without a word. Loved. Celestine seized on the past tense. You said loved. Past tense. Thorn's expression shuttered. What else would it be? Exactly. She took a step back, putting space between them. You've moved on. You have Julian. You have a life. What does it matter why I left? It matters because I deserve to know. Some things are better left unknown. That's not your decision to make. Yes, it is. Celestine's voice rose. It was my decision then, and it's my decision now. You don't get to demand answers just because you want them. Thorn stared at her, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled emotion. You haven't changed at all. Neither have you. They stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The air between them crackled with tension, with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Then, Julian's voice called from the garden. Miss Celestine! Papa! Come see the butterflies! The spell broke. Thorn turned away first, his shoulders rigid. We should go. You just got here. This was a mistake. He moved toward the door, then paused. Julian wanted to see you. I thought... He shook his head. It doesn't matter what I thought. Thorn, wait. He looked back at her, and in his eyes, she saw the echo of the man she had loved, the man she still loved, though she would never admit it aloud. Just tell me one thing, he said quietly. Did you ever love me? Or was it all a lie? The question was a knife to her heart. I loved you, she whispered. More than anything. Then why did you leave? She closed her eyes. Because I loved you. When she opened them again, he was gone. That night, Celestine could not sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of Thorn's visit, his anger, his pain, his questions, and Julian's innocent face asking why she didn't like them. She had hurt them both, unintentionally perhaps, but the damage was real. And now, seeing Thorn again, being near him, it had awakened every feeling she had tried to bury. She still loved him. After 3 years, after everything, her heart had not moved on. But love was not enough. It had never been enough. The next morning, Celestine made a decision. She would leave London. She would return to the countryside and resume her quiet life. It was the only way to protect herself, and to protect Thorn and Julian from the inevitable heartbreak that would come if she stayed. She was packing her trunk when her aunt appeared in the doorway. Running again? Margaret's tone was gentle, but there was disappointment in her eyes. I'm leaving, yes. That boy adores you already, and Thorn hates me, Celestine interrupted. He doesn't. If he hated you, he wouldn't have come here. He wouldn't have asked those questions. Celestine folded a dress with more force than necessary. It doesn't matter. I can't stay. Can't or won't? The echo of Thorn's words made Celestine freeze. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. What are you so afraid of? I'm afraid of dying. The words burst from her before she could stop them. I'm afraid of watching him watch me die. I'm afraid of leaving him alone, of breaking his heart all over again. I'm afraid... Her voice broke. I'm afraid I won't be strong enough to let him go a second time. Margaret crossed the room and pulled Celestine into her arms. Oh, my dear girl. Celestine clung to her aunt, the tears finally falling. For 3 years she had held them back. For 3 years she had been strong, stoic, resigned to her fate. But now, faced with the reality of Thorn and Julian, her strength crumbled. I can't do this, she sobbed. I can't be near them and pretend I don't care. I can't watch Julian grow up knowing I'll never be part of his life. I can't look at Thorn and not want... She couldn't finish the sentence. Then don't pretend, Margaret said softly. Tell him the truth. Give him the choice you denied him 3 years ago. He'll choose to stay. Perhaps. But isn't that his right? Celestine pulled back, wiping at her eyes. And if I die? What then? He'll be left alone again, and Julian will have lost someone else. I can't do that to them. And if you don't die? Margaret challenged. What if the doctors were wrong? What if you have years ahead of you? Will you waste them running from the only man you've ever loved? Celestine had no answer. The decision was made for her 2 days later. Celestine was at the market purchasing fabric when she heard a commotion near the fountain. People were shouting, running. She turned, her heart already racing, and saw a small figure standing too close to the edge of the fountain's raised basin. Julian. He was reaching for something, a toy soldier that had fallen into the water. He leaned further, his small body teetering dangerously over the edge. Celestine didn't think. She dropped her parcels and ran. She reached him just as he lost his balance, her arms wrapped around his waist, pulling him back from the edge. They tumbled together onto the cobblestones, Julian clutching his retrieved soldier and Celestine gasping for breath. Are you all right? She asked, her hands shaking as she checked him for injuries. Julian nodded, his eyes wide. I dropped my soldier. Papa gave it to me. I didn't want to lose it. You could have fallen, Celestine said, her voice trembling. You could have been hurt. But you caught me. Julian smiled up at her, so trusting, so innocent. You saved me. Celestine's heart clenched. She pulled him into her arms, holding him close. He was warm and solid and alive, and the thought of anything happening to him was unbearable. Where is your father? She asked, looking around. He's at the bookshop. I saw the soldier fall and I ran. I shouldn't have, should I? No, Celestine said gently. But you're safe now. Because of you. Julian hugged her tightly. Thank you, Miss Celestine. She heard footsteps fast and urgent. She looked up to see Thorn running toward them, his face pale with fear. Julian! He dropped to his knees beside them, his hands reaching for his son. What happened? Are you hurt? I'm fine, Papa. I almost fell in the fountain, but Miss Celestine saved me. Thorn's eyes met Celestine's over Julian's head. In them she saw relief, gratitude, and something else, something deeper. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Thorn pulled Julian into his arms, holding him as if he might disappear. Don't ever run off like that again. Do you understand? I'm sorry, Papa. I know. Thorn pressed a kiss to his son's head, then looked at Celestine again. Can we speak? Privately? She hesitated, then nodded. They moved to a quieter corner of the square, Julian between them, still clutching his soldier. Thorn crouched down to his son's level. Julian, I need you to sit on that bench and wait for me. Can you do that? Julian looked between them, then nodded solemnly. Yes, Papa. Once he was seated, Thorn turned to Celestine. I owe you everything. If something had happened to him... His voice broke. But it didn't, Celestine said softly. He's safe. Because of you. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Thorn said, He talks about you constantly, every day since we saw you. He asks when we can visit again. He wants to know why you looked sad. He wants... Thorn paused. He wants you in his life. Celestine's heart ached. Thorn, I can't. I'm not asking for me, he interrupted. I'm asking for him. He's already lost so much. He deserves... Thorn stopped, his jaw tightening. He deserves people who care about him. What happened to his mother? The question slipped out before Celestine could stop it. Thorn's expression darkened. She left when he was 6 months old. She didn't want to be a mother. She didn't want the responsibility, so she walked away. The revelation was a shock. I'm so sorry. Don't be. She made her choice, just as you made yours. The comparison stung, but Celestine couldn't argue with it. She had left him, just as Julian's mother had. But her reasons had been different, hadn't they? I didn't want to leave, she said quietly. I thought I had no choice. There's always a choice, Celestine. Not always. Thorn studied her, his gaze searching. What aren't you telling me? Everything, she thought. I'm not telling you everything. But before she could answer, Julian called out, Papa! Miss Celestine! Can we go to the bookshop now? Thorn glanced back at his son, then at Celestine. Will you come with us? Please, just for today. She should say no. She should walk away, return to her aunt's house and leave London as planned. But when she looked at Julian, at his hopeful face and his small hand holding that toy soldier, she found herself nodding. Just for today, she agreed. The bookshop was warm and filled with the scent of paper and leather. Julian dragged Celestine to the children's section, chattering excitedly about his favorite stories. Thorn followed at a distance, watching them with an expression she could not decipher. This one is about a brave knight, Julian said, pulling a book from the shelf. And this one is about a princess who saves herself. Papa reads them to me every night. That sounds wonderful, Celestine said, kneeling beside him. Do you like stories? Julian asked. I do. What's your favorite? Celestine thought for a moment. I like stories where people find each other again after being apart. Julian tilted his head. Why were they apart? Sometimes people have to leave, even when they don't want to. But if they're meant to be together, they find their way back. Like you and Papa? The question caught her off guard. What? You were apart, but now you found each other again. Celestine's throat tightened. It's not quite the same. Why not? She didn't have an answer, or rather, she had too many answers, and none of them were ones she could share with a 5-year-old child. Thorn appeared beside them. Julian, why don't you choose a book? I'll buy it for you. Julian's face lit up. He immediately began scanning the shelves with intense focus. Thorn turned to Celestine. He likes you. I like him too. He's a wonderful boy. He is. Pride softened Thorn's features. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though... Celestine hesitated. Even though his mother left? Especially because of that. Thorn's gaze was steady. He taught me what real love looks like. Unconditional, selfless. He's the reason I wake up every morning, the reason I keep going. Celestine felt tears prick her eyes. He's lucky to have you. And I'm lucky to have him. Thorn paused. But he needs more than just me. He needs... He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. What? What does he need? Thorn looked at her, and in his eyes she saw a vulnerability that made her heart ache. He needs someone who won't leave, someone who will stay, no matter what. The unspoken accusation hung between them. You didn't stay. You left, just like his mother. Thorn. Papa, Miss Celestine, I found 3 books. Julian ran over, his arms full. Can I get all 3? Thorn smiled down at his son, the tension easing from his shoulders. 3 books? That's quite ambitious. I'll read them all, I promise. All right, 3 books it is. As they walked to the counter, Julian slipped his hand into Celestine's. The gesture was so natural, so trusting, that it took her breath away. Will you come read with me sometime? He asked, looking up at her with those wide, hopeful eyes. She glanced at Thorn, who was watching them with an unreadable expression. I don't know, she said softly. Please? Julian's grip tightened. Papa reads really well, but I bet you do too. And it would be nice to have both of you. Both of you, as if they were a unit, a family. The thought was too painful to entertain. We'll see, Celestine said, her voice strained. It was the best she could offer. That evening, Celestine sat in her aunt's parlor, staring into the fire. She could still feel Julian's small hand in hers, still hear his laughter, still see Thorn's guarded expression. She was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. Because despite her best intentions, despite all the walls she had built, she was falling for them. Both of them. And she had no idea how to stop it. You're thinking about them, Margaret said, appearing in the doorway with a tray of tea. Yes. And? And I don't know what to do. Celestine accepted a cup, grateful for something to occupy her hands. Julian asked me to read with him. He wants me to be part of his life. And you want that too. It doesn't matter what I want. Of course it matters. Margaret sat beside her. You can't spend your entire life sacrificing your happiness for others. I'm not sacrificing. I'm protecting. From what? A future that might never come? Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Celestine, you don't know that you'll get sick. You don't know that you'll die young. You're living as if you're already dead, and that's no life at all. But what if I do get sick? What if I marry him and then I die? What if Julian loses another person he cares about? What if you don't? Margaret countered. What if you live a long, healthy life? What if you waste all these years running from something that will never happen? Celestine had no answer. She had spent so long preparing for the worst that she had never considered the possibility of the best. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, but love is always a risk, and sometimes the greatest risk is not taking one at all. The next day, Celestine went to Thorn's estate. She had not planned it, but when she woke that morning, she knew she could not leave London without at least trying to explain. She owed him that much. The butler showed her into a drawing room that was both elegant and comfortable. Toys were scattered in one corner, wooden horses, toy soldiers, a small castle. It was a room that balanced the responsibilities of a duke with the joy of a father. Thorn entered a few minutes later, surprise flickering across his face. Celestine, I didn't expect to see you here. I know. I'm sorry to intrude. You're not intruding. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. She did, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Thorn sat across from her, waiting. I owe you an explanation, Celestine said. For why I left. For everything. Thorn's expression was carefully neutral. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. She took a breath. 3 years ago, I learned that I might have inherited my mother's illness, a disease of the blood. The doctor said I could die young. They said if I had children, they would suffer the same fate. Her voice trembled. I couldn't marry you knowing that. I couldn't let you watch me die. I couldn't give you children who would be doomed to the same illness. So I left. The silence that followed was deafening. Thorne stared at her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he stood. He walked to the window, his back to her. You left because you thought you were dying? His voice was low, strained. Yes. And you didn't think I deserved to know? I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me? He turned, and the anger in his eyes was like a physical blow. You destroyed me, Celestine. I spent months wondering what I had done wrong. I questioned everything, every word I'd said, every action I'd taken. I thought I had failed you somehow. You didn't fail me. You were perfect. Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me decide? Because I knew what you would decide. Celestine stood as well, her own frustration rising. You would have married me anyway. You would have stayed with me even knowing I might die. And I couldn't let you do that. I couldn't let you waste your life on someone who might not survive the decade. That was my choice to make, Thorne's voice rose. You took that from me. You made the decision for both of us, as if my feelings, my wants didn't matter. They mattered too much. That was the problem. They stared at each other, both breathing hard. And now? Thorne asked finally. Are you still sick? I don't know. The symptoms haven't appeared yet, but that doesn't mean they won't. Have you seen a doctor recently? No. Why not? Because I'm afraid of what they'll tell me. Thorne crossed the room in 2 strides. He gripped her shoulders, his eyes blazing. Then we'll see one together, today, now. Thorne. No. His voice was firm. You've spent 3 years running from this, no more. We're going to find out the truth, and then we're going to deal with it. Together. What if the truth is that I'm dying? Then we'll face that too. His grip softened, his thumbs brushing against her shoulders. But you're not going to face it alone. Not this time. Tears slipped down Celestine's cheeks. I don't want to hurt you again. Then stay. His voice was rough with emotion. Stay and let me love you. Let me be there for you, whatever happens. And Julian? Julian already loves you. He's asked about you every day. He wants you in his life. Thorne's expression softened. And so do I. I'm so scared, she whispered. I know. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. But we'll be scared together. For the first time in 3 years, Celestine allowed herself to lean on someone, to accept comfort instead of shouldering everything alone, and it felt like coming home. The doctor's office was austere and smelled of antiseptic. Celestine sat on the examination table, her hands gripping the edge. Thorne stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Dr. Pemberton was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He had examined Celestine thoroughly, asked questions about her symptoms, or lack thereof, and reviewed the notes from the doctors she had seen 3 years ago. Now he sat at his desk, reading through the papers with a furrowed brow. Well? Celestine's voice was tight with anxiety. What's the verdict? Dr. Pemberton looked up. Miss Celestine, I'm afraid the doctors who examined you previously made a grave error. Her heart sank. So I do have it. No. Dr. Pemberton's expression was compassionate. You don't have it. You never did. Celestine blinked. What? Your mother's illness was indeed hereditary, but it manifests in very specific ways. Symptoms appear within the first 2 years if the disease is present. You're now, what, 5 years past your mother's age of onset? 6, Celestine whispered. Then you don't have it. The doctors who diagnosed you based their conclusion on fear and incomplete information, but the evidence is clear. You're healthy. The room spun. Celestine gripped the table harder, trying to process the words. Are you certain? Thorne asked, his voice hoarse. As certain as medicine allows, Miss Celestine is not ill. She will not become ill. And any children she has will not inherit a disease she does not carry. Celestine's vision blurred with tears. 3 years. 3 years of running, of sacrificing, of living as if she were already dead. And it had all been for nothing. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "They were so sure. They told me—" "They were wrong," Dr. Pemberton said gently. "Medicine is not infallible, Miss Celestine. Mistakes happen, but you have a chance now to live the life you were meant to live." Thorne's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. She looked at him through her tears and saw his own eyes were bright with emotion. "You're all right," he said, and his voice was filled with wonder. "You're going to be all right." She nodded, unable to speak. They left the doctor's office in a daze. The streets of London seemed brighter, the air clearer. Celestine felt as if she were waking from a long, terrible dream. "I wasted 3 years," she said as they walked. "I hurt you for nothing." "Not for nothing." Thorne stopped, turning to face her. "You did what you thought was right. You were trying to protect me. That wasn't nothing." "But I was wrong." "You were scared. There's a difference." Celestine shook her head, fresh tears falling. "How can you forgive me?" "Because I love you." Thorne cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I never stopped loving you, Celestine. Even when I was angry, even when I didn't understand, I loved you." "I love you too," she whispered. "I never stopped either." He kissed her then, soft and tender. It was a kiss that tasted of forgiveness, of second chances, of a future that had once seemed impossible. When they pulled apart, Celestine rested her forehead against his. "What now?" "Now we go home," Thorne smiled. "Julian has been dying to see you again." Julian was in the garden when they arrived, chasing butterflies with a net that was far too big for him. When he saw Celestine, he dropped the net and ran to her. "Miss Celestine, you came back!" She caught him as he launched himself at her, spinning him around. His laughter was pure joy, and it filled the hollow spaces in her heart. "I did," she said, setting him down. "And if it's all right with you, I'd like to keep coming back." Julian's eyes went wide. "Really? Every day?" "Maybe not every day, but often." "Will you read with me?" "I'd love to." Julian grabbed her hand and started pulling her toward the house. "I have so many books to show you, and Papa said I could get a puppy. Do you like puppies?" Celestine laughed, a real laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I love puppies." She glanced back at Thorne, who was watching them with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. Mouthing a silent thank you, she let Julian lead her inside. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Celestine visited the estate nearly every day. She read with Julian, played with him in the garden, listened to his endless stories. And slowly, carefully, she rebuilt her relationship with Thorne. They talked for hours, working through the pain of the past 3 years. They apologized, forgave, and learned to trust again. It was not easy, but it was worth it. One evening, as they sat in the drawing room after Julian had gone to bed, Thorne took her hand. "I have something to ask you," he said. Celestine's heart skipped. "What is it?" "Julian asked me today if you could be his mother." She froze. "He what?" "He said he knows his real mother left, but he thinks you would be a good replacement. His words, not mine." Thorne smiled. "I told him I would ask you." Tears filled Celestine's eyes. "What did you tell him I would say?" "I told him I hoped you would say yes, to being his mother, and to being my wife." Celestine's breath caught. "Thorne, I know we're still rebuilding. I know there's still healing to be done. But I don't want to waste any more time, Celestine. I want you in my life, in Julian's life, permanently." "Are you proposing?" she whispered. "Yes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was the same ring he had given her 3 years ago, the one she had left behind when she fled. I've kept this. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. And now, he slipped it onto her finger. Now I'm giving it back to you. If you'll have it. If you'll have us. Celestine looked down at the ring, then up at him. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be Julian's mother. I'll be yours. Yes to all of it. Thorn pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. We're going to be a family, Celestine said, wonder in her voice. We already are, Thorn replied. The wedding took place 3 months later in the estate's garden. It was a small affair, attended only by close friends and family. Julian served as the ring-bearer, his pride evident in every step. As Celestine walked down the aisle, she looked at the 2 people waiting for her. Thorn, tall and handsome in his formal attire, and Julian, beaming at her with pure joy. This was her family, her future, her second chance. When she reached them, Julian whispered loudly, "You look like a princess, Miss Celestine." She laughed, kneeling down to his level. "Thank you, Julian. Are you going to be my mama now?" "If you'll have me." He threw his arms around her neck. "Yes, I want you to be my mama forever." Celestine held him tight, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Then she stood, taking Thorn's hand. The vicar began the ceremony, but Celestine barely heard the words. She was too focused on Thorn's face, on the love shining in his eyes, on the small boy standing beside them. When it came time for the vows, Thorn spoke first. "Celestine, 3 years ago I lost you. I didn't understand why, and it broke me. But now I understand that sometimes we have to lose things to truly appreciate them. I lost you, and it taught me the value of every moment, every smile, every touch. I promise to cherish you, to protect you, and to never take a single day with you for granted. You are my heart, my home, my everything." Celestine's tears fell freely as she spoke her own vows. "Thorn, I spent 3 years running from a future I thought was inevitable. I ran from you, from love, from happiness. But you found me again. You and Julian pulled me back into the light. I promise to never run again. I promise to stay, to fight, to love you with everything I have. You are my second chance, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve it." They exchanged rings, kissed as husband and wife, and turned to face their small gathering. Julian cheered, jumping up and down. "Mama and Papa! Mama and Papa!" The words were music. That night, after the celebration had ended and Julian was asleep, Celestine and Thorn stood on the terrace, looking out at the moonlit garden. "Do you remember the question Julian asked the day we met again?" Thorn said quietly. "Papa, why doesn't that lady like us?" Celestine quoted. "How could I forget? He sees things so simply. To him, if someone looks sad, it means they don't like you. Children have a way of cutting through all the complexity, don't they?" "They do." Thorn pulled her closer. "I'm glad he asked that question. It brought you back to us." "I'm glad too." Celestine leaned her head against his shoulder. "I was so lost, Thorn. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving, but all I did was hurt everyone, including myself. You were trying to protect the people you loved. That's not a flaw, Celestine. It's one of the things I love most about you. Even though it nearly destroyed us? Even though." He kissed the top of her head. "We're stronger now. We've been tested, and we survived. Together," she added. "Together." They stood in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. "Mama!" Julian's voice called from inside. "Papa, I had a bad dream." Celestine smiled, pulling away from Thorn. "I'll go." "We'll both go," Thorn said, taking her hand. They walked inside together, ready to comfort their son, their family. And as Celestine tucked Julian back into bed, listening to him whisper about his dream and how he wasn't scared now that she was there, she realized something profound. She had spent 3 years preparing to lose everything, but in the end, she had gained more than she ever could have imagined. A husband who loved her unconditionally, a son who needed her, and a future that was no longer defined by fear, but by hope. "Mama?" Julian's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart? I'm glad you like us now." Celestine's throat tightened. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "I always liked you, Julian. I loved you from the moment I saw you. I was just scared." "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of losing your papa. But I'm not scared anymore." Julian smiled, his eyes drifting closed. "Good, because we're not going anywhere." "Neither am I," Celestine whispered. She sat with him until he fell asleep, then returned to the bedroom she now shared with Thorn. He was waiting for her, his arms open. She went to him and he held her close. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," he replied. "Always." And in that moment, surrounded by love and light and the promise of tomorrow, Celestine finally let go of the fear that had haunted her for so long. She was home. She was loved. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, Celestine sat in the garden, watching Julian, now 10 years old, teach his younger sister how to climb trees. Little Rosamond was 4, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn determination. She insisted on doing everything her big brother did, even when it resulted in scraped knees and torn dresses. "Be careful," Celestine called, though she knew they would ignore her. Thorn appeared beside her, setting a hand on her shoulder. "They're fine. I know. I just worry. You always worry. Someone has to." He laughed, bending to kiss her cheek. "They're strong, like their mother." Celestine smiled, leaning into him. "And stubborn, like their father." "I have another surprise for you," Thorn said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Oh no, the last surprise was a pony, which Julian is now determined to ride in every race in England. This one is smaller and less expensive." He pulled a letter from his pocket. "It's from Dr. Pemberton." Celestine's smile faded. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right." Thorn handed her the letter. "Read it." She unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the words. As she read, her hand flew to her mouth. "Another baby?" she whispered. "Another baby," Thorn confirmed, his smile wide. Celestine looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "But I thought after Rosamond," the doctor said. "He was wrong. Again. Apparently, our family isn't finished yet." She laughed through her tears, throwing her arms around his neck. "I can't believe it." "Believe it." He held her tightly. "We're going to have another child. Our family is growing." Julian and Rosamond, hearing the commotion, ran over. "What's happening?" Julian asked. "Why is Mama crying?" "Happy tears," Celestine said, wiping her face. "I have wonderful news. You're going to be a big brother again." Julian's face lit up. "Really? Another baby?" "Another baby," Thorn confirmed. Rosamond tugged on Celestine's skirt. "Will it be a girl or a boy?" "We don't know yet, darling." "I hope it's a girl," Rosamond declared. "Then we can play dolls together." "And if it's a boy?" Thorn asked, amused. "Then Julian can teach him to climb trees, and I'll teach him to be brave." Celestine laughed, pulling both children into her arms. "You're both going to be wonderful siblings." As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the garden, Celestine looked at her family, her husband, her children, and the new life growing within her. 8 years ago, she had stood on a London street, watching Thorn and Julian from a distance, believing she could never be part of their world. But love had brought her back, Love had healed her wounds. Love had given her a second chance. And now, surrounded by the family she had once thought impossible, Celestine understood the truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not letting go. Sometimes it's holding on, even when you're afraid. Sometimes it's staying, even when every instinct tells you to run. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love gives you a second chance. A chance to be brave. A chance to be happy. A chance to build a life more beautiful than any you could have imagined. "Mama, come play with us," Julian called, already running back toward the trees. Celestine smiled, taking Thorn's hand. "Shall we?" "Always," he said. And together they joined their children in the garden, their laughter echoing across the estate, a testament to the love that had brought them all together. The love that had survived loss and fear and 3 long years of separation. The love that had answered a little boy's innocent question, "Papa, why doesn't that lady like us?" and turned it into a promise, "Because I loved you too much to stay. But I love you even more now that I'm home."